This morning, I'm happy to have in this slot, half an hour, 35-minute slot, the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs, responsible for Labour, Kenneth Hodge. Mr. Hodge, it's good to have you. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here this morning. Good morning.
Keystone, good morning. It's a pleasure as always. It's a beautiful day in Anguilla today, and certainly I want to say good morning to all of your radio listeners, those of you listening via the internet and on Radio Anguilla 95.5 FM. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Okay, Minister, we'll be having some rapid-fire question type style here this morning, where we have a number of questions lined up for you as the Honourable Minister responsible for Labour. Let's start with the work permit policy, the number of applications you've had, the number of work permits issued prior to the start of the new tourism season, the monitoring process that goes on with your Labour Department of the work permit approval, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so Keith, where do I dive in? Well, before I get into that, I just wanted to share a little bit with the listeners. I was reading a report from ECLAC ILO. It's titled Employment Situation in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's available online, right? And it's up to November 2020. I just wanted to share briefly. It kind of sets a preface for what's been happening in the Caribbean and Anguilla. And just to say here, in 2020, the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic dealt an unprecedented blow to the economies and labor markets of Latin America and the Caribbean. Most countries in the region adopted measures to reduce the spread of the disease by halting economic activities and restricting the movement of people. And you know, this would have played out here in Anguilla. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, has estimated that this situation will lead to the worst GDP contraction in the region's history, a projected downturn of 9.1 in 2020, which has already had and will continue to have profound labor and social consequences. And just to go on a little further quickly, so labor market trends in Latin America and the Caribbean have been largely dominated by the coronavirus COVID-19 health crisis since March 2020, when the disease emerged in the countries of the region. Containment measures were taken to limit infection and included the suspension of economic activities and restrictions to the movement of people. The result was a disruption in economic development with serious consequences for employment. And I mean, this is a very comprehensive document, and I encourage persons to just go online, look for it, and read it. It's very interesting. So yes, so let's delve into your question. So I would have asked
where are the applications coming from, the number of work permits issued prior to the start of the new tourism season, the Labour Department's monitoring and processing of the work permit approval by EXCO, who determines how many and to whom work permits are issued, and so on and so forth.
So up to the end of October, the Labour Department would have issued 671 work permits. And I want to break them down for you by month and by category. So we have 4 categories. One is temporary work permits, which are work permits for less than a year, which are usually granted when persons with specialized expertise, skills, or persons needed to come in to do a specific job and then leave. This can include training staff. So that's the first category of temporary work permits. And then we have new change of employment, where a person has already had a work permit with one employer, and they are going to leave to work with a new employer, or they are changing their position in the organization. And these are persons who have a history of working on Anguilla. Okay? And then we have new work permits. These are brand new, granted to entirely new persons coming in to work on island for the first time for the entire year. And then we have renewals, where permits are granted to continue the employee's employment with the employer in the same position for a further year. These employees are residing on island. They have a history of having worked on the island, and they are continuing the employment in a position they already have. So those are the 4 categories that I will be speaking to. Right, so as I mentioned before, between January 2021 and the end of October 2021, there have been a total of 671 permits. And I'm going to break them down now for you by month. So in the month of January, we'd have had 74 work permits. These were 5 temporary, 3 change of employment, 4 new, and 62 renewal. In the month of February, there would have been 65. That would have been 11 temporary, 3 new, 3 change of employment, 12 new, 39 renewal. That's a total of 65, as I said. In the month of March, there would have been 70. There were no temporary in the month of March, so there were 7 change of employment, 7 new, and 56 renewals. In the month of April, there would have been 57 in total, broken down as 6 temporary, 5 change of employment, 8 new, 38 renewals. In the month of May, 30, broken down as 3 temporary, 2 change of employment, 5 new, 20 renewals. In the month of June, 103, broken down as 19 temporary, 6 change of employment, 17 new, and 61 renewals. In the month of July, 44, broken down as 5 temporary, 3 change of employment, 4 new, 32 renewals. In the month of August, 91, broken down as 23 temporary, 5 change of employment, 20 new, and 43 renewals. In the month of September, 91, broken down as 26 temporary, 5 change of employment, 17 new, and 43 renewals. And in the month of October, 47, broken down as 1 temporary, there were no change of employment, 22 new, and 24 renewals. That comes up to a grand total of 671. Now the process, as you've been indicating. So an employer has a need for a position. The employer would come into the Labor Department and register the fact that they require employment in this particular sector. They would bring in a job description setting out what are the duties of the position, what are the skill sets required, and then they are required to advertise this position in the social media, that is Radio Angola newspaper and social media, for a specific period of time. And during that time, it is open for anyone to apply. And when the period closes, the employer would then look at the applications that were submitted, and the employer would then indicate to the Labor Department that the persons who applied, we did not find any suitable persons locally, and therefore we are applying for someone to come in on a work permit, right? One of the things that we have been doing, particularly since I have come into office, and I believe this has been the case before as well, when we get the applications, we are also asking for a listing of all those local persons who also applied. So your application
so that is
for
put
work
up.
permit,
That you ask for that.
that is standard practice for us now.
To ask for locals who are
Right, so they have to give us, okay, so you're asking for Tom to come in on a work permit, but we want to know who were the other applicants. We want to know what were the skill sets. We want to know where did they fall down in the process. So all of that is information that helps me to make a decision as to whether or not that work permit should
So,
be
Minister, that plays a big role. That, what you just said,
yes.
is very critical,
Oh,
because
yes.
I'm going to get to a question later on, which will factor into this as well. Yes.
Oh, yes. In some cases, we have not been getting the level of information we requested, and certainly when that happens, we will push back.
What is the kind of information that you specifically ask in cases?
Specifically,
like
okay,
this?
so let us say, for example, you want a position for a manager, and you're asking us to bring in somebody from North America to fill that position. And there was Tom there was Jerry, there was Ann here in Anguilla, who had similar qualifications, and they applied. So you have to tell us what was wrong with those 3 applicants, why it is you cannot consider them for the position for which you require. And one of the things we also look very carefully at is even the nature of the job descriptions themselves. Because employers can use a local word, they can sit down and literally fix a job description to suit a particular person they may have in mind.
And that's precisely one of the questions I have for you, Minister,
Right,
because I've been getting a lot of those complaints
and we are saying
coming
here
into us here.
that your advertisement, your requirement must be reasonable. It must meet the requirements for what you would like. So in other words, you cannot ask, let's say, for a cleaner, and you want somebody with a bachelor's or a master's. I'm just being general here to draw to your attention that there must be a fit between the job and the requirements. And the requirements must fit within that, because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that every able-bodied Anguillan who is so ably qualified has the ability to apply and get the position.
So the Anguillan must get first preference once they're ably qualified.
Once they are qualified, first
that
preference.
is the standard.
That is the standard.
Across it. Now, in terms of EXCO, and who determines how many and to whom these work permits are granted? How does that determination at that higher level, at the highest level, EXCO level?
Right. So work permits do not go to EXCO for approval. Work permits are the purview of the Minister of Labour by law, and the Minister is guided by the advice of the Labour Department, with the advice of his permanent secretary. We all sit and we look at and review. What goes to EXCO is when we do revoke work permits. So, for example, if just after the lockdowns back in 2020, we would have taken quite a few names to EXCO. So those names have to go to EXCO for approval. When we revoke work permits, those go back for EXCO's approval, yes.
Minister, I have a specific situation. I've been getting some complaints from some persons, technical people in the technical field at one of the resorts, where it has been brought to my attention that workers are coming in from outside, and I've heard St. Martin mentioned as close as St. Martin coming in with skill sets in the technical area that I've been told that we don't need those workers coming in, because the skill set and the work that they're doing, we have ably qualified technicians. I'm looking here at persons from Lime and Digicel who've been laid off and are now finding it very difficult, because one of the hospitality businesses are bringing in people from outside, technicians, to do what I've been told the local techs here, those techs who've been laid off from Digicel and Flow can do. I don't know if you're aware of this and if you can speak to this situation, because that was brought to my attention by someone who actually is in that line of work.
Right. So, Keith, it is a standard practice that once positions are advertised, Anguillans can apply. And certainly if there are skilled persons out there in the technical field as to what you are just describing, certainly if they had applied, they would have had to be considered in the mix of things, right? In a particular case, and I guess we are all talking about Aurora here, that institution, that resort, they have been doing a tremendous amount of work to get the property up and running in time for the season. And yes, they have been bringing in quite a number of persons, consultants, persons on short-term contracts to get the property up and running. And it has been in different fields, IT, construction, golf, operational, the kitchen, different aspects, chefs and so forth. And yes, they are bringing on quite a number of persons on a temporary basis. But at the end of the day, Keith, we have always strived at the Department of Labor, where there is local expertise available, we utilize that. I mean, not only talking about local labor in terms of persons, we also talking in terms of equipment as well. Yeah. And there would have been 1 or 2 times where we had to actually physically put a halt on importation of equipment to ensure that our locals were given the opportunity to utilize their equipment.
Minister, you mentioned temporary and short-term contracts, and that too has again been something that's been talked about. Share with us your understanding. What is the government's position on the short-term contracts? How does this all work? And the role of government in monitoring, and the Labor Department more so, in monitoring these short-term contracts.
Right. So perhaps I could just go to the labor law and just right. So the Labor Act provides for permanent employees. This is Section 6, Part 2, Section 6. It provides for permanent employees, fixed-term employees, seasonal employees, and casual employees. And one of the things that, and again we're going back to Aurora now, because I guess that is the big, one of the things that I have made sure was that when the property would have transitioned from Cuisinart to Aurora, those employees, we were given the assurance that those employees that were there were retained.
And has that been done? As far as you're aware?
That has been done.
That has been done.
There were a couple of redundancies, but that has been done. And now the property is seeking to be open, and I believe you may have had Mr. Fricker here.
That's right.
Some weeks ago. And so they are hoping to open with a bumper crowd. They're hoping to open with full. And so there have been a need for a number of additional staff to come on board. And that is where these persons are coming in as seasonal employees, or the big term around I am hearing is the 6-month contracts. But essentially, these are workers that are being brought in to fill the gap. There's no surety as to how the season will perform, but they are coming there. So the existing workers are not affected by this. They are already permanent.
So they're going through the process as stated clearly in the labor law. They're not in breach of any law. They're just following what is stated there in the labor law.
And all the resorts do this, Keith. Okay. All the resorts do this. All of them have their suite of permanent employees, and they also have times when the peak is high, and of course they have to bring in additional persons. Sometimes, the occupancy goes down, and so they have to lessen number of staff. So there always be room within the sector for the up and down of employment of staff. Mm-hmm. Seasonal staff, temporary staff. This is a normal part of business, Keith. As you know, the market fluctuates, and it doesn't make economic sense to have a large number of persons on staff and you don't have the occupancy, Keith, to make it feasible. So there will be always a need for some level of fluctuation in terms of the employment. Yeah. But I'm happy to know that those workers who were there all of those years before, they are not affected.
And you as Minister and your Labor Department are fully aware of everything that's taking place in this sector. There's nothing that is escaping the eyes. They're human beings, yes, but nothing that is escaping the watch. Because people are coming in, are looking at these situations very carefully, Minister. The clarity I would like from you, sir, on the rotation of personnel. at a road. This has come up again since the acquisition of another property close by, and there was this talk of personnel coming in and occupying this property, and now I'm hearing that another one of the big resorts are looking again at their own getting their own personnel occupying some properties and so on. So this again, Minister, is creating a bit of talk out there. This is what has been reported to me. So I'm just bringing it to your attention as Minister and see if you are across this. Are you aware of anything in that area? Just to get some clarity on all of this for the
Keith,
public.
Let me assure you that these matters, and they normally relate to alien and holding license applications. These come in, and these matters go before Cabinet. And as a government, we discuss it. We get advice from the AG's chambers. We get advice from the technical people. And even in terms of the last alien and holding license, which would have included Paradise Cove and Southdale Villas, we would have had extensive discussions with our technical staff at Lands and Surveys, the Ministry of Economic Development, and so forth, the AG's chambers. So at the end of the day, when Council makes these decisions, they are guided, they have the benefit of the advice from the technical people at all levels of government. And yes, at the end of the day, the Executive Council makes decisions, and we believe that when we make these decisions, we make them in the best interests of Anguilla.
Minister, school leavers, incentive by employers to hire as many of the school leavers as possible. The mentorship program as well. What can you share with us at this time?
You're talking about the understudy program?
Understudy program,
right.
And school leavers and some incentives maybe to employers to get these school leavers on board.
So for some time, we've been working on an understudy policy. This has been developed. It would have gone off to the ILO. They came back with their comments, and it's now with the AG's chambers basically for their final look-see. I understand now that the chambers have rendered an opinion on it. It's back with the Labour Department. So I'm looking to get it in my hand very soon, Keith. And when we do that, the next step will be to take it to Executive Council for approval. Of course, we will share it with the stakeholders in the various industries and also get some feedback from them. But we are moving ahead in this direction, and when this is done, Keith, it will really give us another tool in our arsenal to ensure that we continue to build the capacity of Anguillians. Because one of the things over the years that I have observed, in particular since I've come into office, has been that there has not been really a true partnership between government and some of the resorts in terms of keeping true to the word of developing the local skill sets. There have been cases where they have changed the goalposts. There have been cases where they have put people in understudy positions that they really were not qualified for. And so at the end of the day, 2, 3, 4 years pass, we still did not have somebody in that position.
And you as Minister intend to assure the people of Anguilla that you intend, while you're Minister, to hold some of these resort owners, they hold their feet to the fire.
We already started that.
Yeah.
We already started that. And one of the ways of getting around that is ensuring from the get-go that the person that you identify really meets the target for what the position really entails. And this is where the understudy policy is going to come in. Because at the end of the day, Keith, we have to ensure that if you're going to train up somebody in a particular position, we're going to see that person in that position in 2 or 3 years. Depends on the nature of what the job entails. Because at the end of the day, I want to say something here. To me, there'll always be a measure of work permits in the labor market. There will always be. And I think we have to be clear that large corporations put a lot of money into developing their projects, their resorts. And they will always want to have some measure of their own people, so to speak, in terms of key positions. But we are saying here as well, we do not mind that, but we have to ensure that we also see an equal input by our local skilled labor force in the market as well.
There must be equity.
There must be equity. There must be equity. But I don't ever foresee the day when we will do away completely with work permits. I think there will always be some measure of it around. And, you know, we tend to stress a lot on the the hotel sector. But you'd be amazed to know we have persons on work permit working in supermarkets, hairdressers, mechanics, because sometimes some of these persons will tell you that it's hard to find some other local to fix trucks or to do this. So there are lots and lots of categories, Keith. I mean, we tend to focus a lot on the hotel sector, but when you look across the entire gamut, Keith, there are babysitters, there are persons in the house cleaning, there are persons looking after other persons. A lot of them are what we call menial jobs that Anguillians don't want to take up, but there's a need for it. And so we end up granting work permits in all kinds of sectors that people don't really talk about, but they are there.
So you're not painting with a broad brush. You're looking at it in a case-by-case basis.
Case-by-case,
and the unique circumstances.
Basis. And obviously, understudy will only apply to certain categories of jobs as well. And we're talking about a higher echelon of jobs, the middle and higher management positions, yes.
Another area of concern that has been brought to my attention, Honourable Minister, the ISL. And what I understand is that some employers are using the ISL threshold. A $2,000 figure was given to me. And they are taking on persons below that number, so they won't have to pay into the ISL scheme. And that is one way of coming around and beating the system. That has been brought to my attention. Have you heard anything about that? Is there anything you could share with us on this? Where persons are using that scheme, some employers are using that threshold, the ISL threshold, and beating down the system by not paying workers over $2,000 and hence would not be required under the legislation to pay into the ISL program.
Yes, that's something I've heard as well, and I know persons are very creative when it comes to trying to not pay the taxes that are due to the government of Anguilla. But this is something I know that the Inland Revenue Department is aware of, and they are taking steps to correct it. Because at the end of the day, Keith, and let us be very real here, we are talking about persons. Our fiscal situation is bad as it is. We need to collect every single dollar that we can in this country, keep this country going. And if you're going to have persons that are trying to find creative ways of beating the system, it means that the revenues that are coming to the coffers of government are lessened. So let us be real. Persons need to step up to the plate to pay their fair share of their taxes. And if they are trying to cheat on ISL, it means that our opportunity to raise much needed revenue, Keith, to fund our services in Anguilla is diminished. So I think business persons who are doing this, I think we need to cry shame on them. Because at the end of the day, Keith, this country is an unprecedented economic crisis, so to speak. And I mean it's across the region, but particularly Anguilla for its small size, we are being hardest hit. We are now trying to get our economy up and running. We are now seeing a sort of resurgence in the tourism sector. But Keith, this is just starting up again. It hasn't been sustained. So I think persons need to understand that they need to pay their fair share of taxes.
Minister, due to the COVID pandemic, there was started here in Anguilla, came into being the Digital Nomad program. Can you share with us how much money has been collected from this program? I know, for example, Bermuda's Labour Minister, Jason Hayward, has reported that Bermuda has made some $23 million from its Digital Nomad program. What can you share with us on Anguilla's Digital Nomad program? I
know it's going well. I don't have, at this particular time, any facts as to the amount of funds that have been derived from it. But what I can safely say here this morning, that we have had quite an uptake of persons in this program, and we have also seen in a number of cases where these persons have loved it so much here that they have invested in land and property. So they have applied for A-land and holding licenses. But in terms of the actual statistics, Keith, that is something that I would have to try to get some further information on. As you will notice here in Anguilla, as decision makers, Keith, I cannot go to my computer screen and click a key and see everything I want there, you know? Because even for this information that I presented here this morning, I had to get the folks over at Labor Department and they had to go through the files and so forth to pull out the information. So it's all there. But I think in terms of the digital age, we are getting there slowly. But I want to come to the day when you ask me a question, I can just pull out my tablet, tap a key, and I can get that information for you. You know, and I would like us to see us get to that stage at some point in our time. So I don't really have actual figures for you at this point.
You mentioned the alien landholding licenses, revenue from that for government, and will there be any extension of that alien landholding licenses after 2021?
Well, it ends at the end of December, and right now, the Department of Lands and Surveys, they're actually doing some consultation with the sector. As a matter of fact, I would have reached out to quite a number of the local realtors and brokers, and we'd have gotten quite a good feedback. And there's general consensus that this has been a good thing for government. It has derived considerable sums of money into the coffers of government. I believe I made a release some months ago that spoke to this. I really don't have it with me, so I can't recall offhand. But I did say back then it had been really lucrative for government. And so we have to make a decision by the end of this year whether we're going to continue with it or whether we're going to revert back. So at this point in time, I really can't say for certain what that decision will be.
And finally, Minister, see we're almost out of time. Observers here in Anguilla have been seeing an increase in employment in private home building, in the private home building sector, particularly by many persons who now call Anguilla home. Are these stats from this area in terms of employment numbers and the contribution to the GDP, the GDP of Anguilla, have these been factored into the overall economic stats here in Anguilla? But it seems to be a mushrooming and growing area, employment in the private home building sector by persons who've now call Anguilla home. People from outside who now live in Anguilla and are getting it. There seems to be a steady stream of employment. So I'm trying to get at, you know, are these stats and the monetary output from this factored into the overall scheme of things?
Yes, because the Minister of Economic Development and Statistics Department, all of these collate. But let me say as well, you know that some time ago the NCBA would have instituted a program where they were offering, loans to persons to buy land and build houses. And that has been paying dividends. Persons are sending out lots of applications to the Physical Planning Department for home construction. So, I mean, Keith is taking off. Persons are making investment. The rates are quite attractive. And two, Keith, I also want to mention as well that we have also tremendous interest from a lot of persons who are not from Anguilla, but who are living here, who also want to buy land. They also want to build houses, and because of their status, they cannot. And one of the things that I have been pushing, and I'm continuing to push, is a policy whereby we can offer some incentives to those persons, perhaps even by considering a lowering of the age, where they can obtain status. So we are looking into all of this, because at the end of the day, Keith, we have to broaden our economic base. We cannot expect that the number of persons that currently contribute taxes can really move this country forward. We have to significantly broaden our tax base so that more persons pay tax, which means that the struggle to jump down on the few of us that pay is sort of widened, And that is one of the dreams that I have come into office with, and I'm continuing with it. I will tell you it's been challenging. But nonetheless, all my life, Keith, I have lived the challenges, and we find ways to circumvent and overcome.
Lastly, very briefly, Minister, as an aside, looking forward to the start of the new parliamentary season?
Yes, that starts tomorrow. The Premier will outline his government's plans and programs for the year, and we're looking forward to great anticipation for that. Keith, has been a very tough time since we have got into office, but I would say it's been really rewarding from the fact that, yes, it's been challenging times, but I think we have, as a government, been able to steer the course. We have been making some really difficult decisions, yes, and a lot of persons are not happy with us. But I want to say at the end of the day, Keith, whatever we're doing in the best interests of the people of Angola, and we continue to ask for that level of support. So tomorrow is going to be an exciting day, the start of our new parliamentary season. And you know, it's going to be the first time in a lot of years that we've had the House proroguing. And certainly, you know, we're looking forward with great anticipation to the Premier's address tomorrow.
Honourable Minister of Home Affairs, with responsibility for Labour, Kenneth Hodge, I want to thank you so very much for coming in and fitting into our 35-minute, and we're right on the money, 35-minute time slot. Thanks for answering and taking all my questions. Thank you so very much, Minister.
Yes, Keith, it was a pleasure, and as always, you were very tough and difficult questions, but that is what we are here for, Keith, to keep the public of Angola informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister Kenneth Hodge. Folks, here's where we will be leaving it for this morning. Thank you for listening.